glad you could join me. Today is a request. Although this person tends to be shy and makes their request and then deletes their comments, so you may not see it in the comments. But nonetheless, I liked the idea, and so I thought I would look around and see what I could find regarding this topic. So please, if you're feeling shy, you just want to make sure I get the message, go ahead, put it in the comments, and delete it if you don't want to feel embarrassed about requesting something. I will usually see it before the comment goes away, and I always take it to heart and see what I can find, because I love when people interact and they put up requests for me to show something in particular. So what are we covering today? This is legends of the West. And what it's referring to is not just the West, it's referring to the Old West in the United States. And this book is pretty cool. It kind of has that crinkled look. It is actually a stamp book, and it shows the stamps of certain characters from the Wild West. Inside the cover we have Old Town America right here. And a lot of towns still have some of their old downtown buildings. You can see the decorative cornices at the top. And here is wagons and horses and riding on horseback. So this is a collection of U.S. commemorative stamps. And so here it has a picture of all the stamps here in the book. It has an introduction by Roy Rogers, and then the stamps cover Overland Mail, Buffalo Bill, Jim Bridger, Annie Oakley, Chief Joseph, Bill Pickett, Bat Masterson, John Fremont, Wyatt Earp, Native American Culture, Home on the Range, Nellie Cashman, Charles Goodnight, Geronimo, Kit Carson, Wild Bill Hickok, Jim Beckwourth, Bill Tileman, Sacagawea, Western Wildlife, and then there's the stamps and acknowledgments. This is the introduction from Roy Rogers, who was an actor from, at this point, quite a while ago. I thought we'd just skip on to some of the things that I've marked. We have the Pony Express here, and here's the stamp that commemorates the Overland Mail when it used to go by stagecoach out west. Here's our first one that I wanted to cover. This is Buffalo Bill, or William Frederick Cody. He was living from 1846 to 1917. And here wears the stamp which commemorates him as an older Buffalo Bill, with his gray hair and mustache and beard, still wearing his deerskin coat and his hat. William Frederick Cody rode onto the plains at the height of the conflict between white men who would invade and red men who would defend. As a cavalry scout, frontiersman, and buffalo hunter, Cody lived out the role that he also dramatized on the stage, and that forever shaped the image of the Wild West. Hiring out at 11 years old, as an express messenger, Cody was tailor-made for the Pony Express during its heyday, 1860 to 61. Once he made an epic run of 320 miles, he briefly prospected, trapped, and served as a stage driver before being hired to provide buffalo meat for railroad construction camps. Uncanny marksmanship in killing thousands of the animals gave him the name that soon became legend. Army incursions onto the plains, the advance of the railroad, and the slaughter of the buffalo stirred anger and desperation among the Plains Native American, particularly the Sioux and Cheyenne. General Philip Sheridan appointed Cody chief scout of the 5th Cavalry. In an unmatched 13-month period, he took part in 9 Indian fights, taking a wound in the head and killing the Cheyenne chief Tall Bull. As a scout, Cody met writer Ned Buntline and became the subject of popular dime novels. He guided famous figures on hunting expeditions, including European royalty, and his fame spread. In 1872, he took part in a Buntline play, The Scouts of the Prairie, a literary disaster but a popular triumph. Cody began a strange dual life. Each winter he staged the Western melodrama. Each summer he returned to a real-life role of scout on the plains. In 1882, he launched the Wild West extravaganza that brought world fame and spawned dozens of imitators. Buckskin scouts, gun-toting cowboys, and war-bonneted Indians performed feats of horsemanship and marksmanship that, for 3 decades, dazzled audiences at home and in Europe. Meanwhile, the Prince of the Plains bought land in Wyoming's grassy Bighorn Basin and launched the town of Cody. A trusting nature led to bad investments that dimmed later days, but Buffalo Bill died in 1917, a national hero. Here he is in 1893 in military dress uniform. His coat, the brass buttons down the front, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The gold braids on his shoulder. A white under part that looks like a cleric's uniform. His iconic beard and mustache and long, flowing wavy hair. And here he is in the same year, dressed up for his part in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, in his buckskin jacket, and he's got a saddle and other paraphernalia of horse riding and his cowboy hat. Here he is in 1911 as he's aged, his white beard and mustache. He still has long hair. Here he is in 1883 with his buckskin coat and a lasso. Quite the large belt buckle there. And in 1872, he's got that long hair. Brass buttons down his jacket, some fringe on the shoulders. Some wavy hair and a smaller hat. Oakley, Phoebe Ann Oakley Mosey, from 1860 to 1926. And here's her stamp. Her standing in front of some western, either mountains or buttes, a dress and hat. Ohio neighbors marveled at little Phoebe Ann Mosey. She had a fascination with guns, and she used them with awesome skill. At 12, she put her gift to work, helping support her destitute family by shooting wild game birds for Cincinnati restaurants. Sideshow sharpshooter Frankie Butler also enjoyed a reputation as a marksman and offered to take on all comers at clay pigeons. An admirer persuaded a reluctant Anne, only 15, to compete. To the cheers of the crowd, she won on the last shot, 25 to 24. Frank won too, a bride. Soon billed as Annie Oakley, she starred in his stage and circus act as a trick shooter. Annie auditioned for Buffalo Bill's show, which was beginning its 3rd year. Firing in pouring rain, she shattered aerial targets and shot dimes from Frank's fingers and a cigarette from his mouth, and won a job. In Cody's show, the diminutive Annie appeared in the arena in fringed buckskin skirt and wide-brimmed hat. Quickly, she pumped 50 shots through the center of a small cart held by Frank, then shot from a bicycle and a galloping horse. Her popularity gave the show new life. She won the admiration of another of Cody's stars, the Sioux Chief Sitting Bull, and he gave her the name Little Sure Shot. The Wild West show toured Europe, and Annie acquired international fame. Crown Prince Michael of Russia challenged her to a rifle match, and she outshot him 47 to 36. On invitation from German Crown Prince Wilhelm, she shot a lighted cigarette from his lips. Wow, he was pretty trusting. In her 17th year with the show, the Wild West train was in a head-on collision. Resigning from the Wild West, she performed again in Western shows, taught women and girls to shoot, and still won shooting tournaments. During World War I, Annie found another role with a gun, instructing American soldiers in marksmanship, regaling them with exhibitions of her trick shooting. I didn't know that she'd done that. Little Sure Shot had earned the devotion of the nation when she died in her sleep at 66. 3 movies and a musical memorialize her, but they show as a tomboy a quiet, gentle woman who happened to be good with a gun. So here she is in 1887. So she would have been 27 there. With her buckskin skirt with fringe and embroidery up the side, buttons down the front, her hat, long wavy hair, and her 2 guns next to her. And then here she is in a portrait in 1889 in a white or light-colored dress, much more formal looking, with a brooch at her neck and her hair plaited behind her. Here she is in 1887 as well, more of a close-up of this picture. You can see this star pendant on her hat, jewels in the middle. She has on pearl drop earrings. And here it looks like she has a medal, a medallion of some sort, instead of a brooch around her collar. Then in 1893, at the height of her career, these must all be pins from awards. She has lots of ribbons and awards from her shooting prowess. And then here she is in 1915. With a little bit more age, her hair is quite light here. From age, she's got a formal dress on. It's quite lovely, embroidered face. Born on August 13th in Darke County, Ohio, is Phoebe Ann Mosey. In 1864, her father dies, leaving 8 children and the family destitute. In 1872, she helps support the family by shooting quail and other game birds for local shopkeepers and gains a reputation for marksmanship. In 1875, an acquaintance persuades her to enter a shooting match with Frankie Butler, a professional sharpshooter. She downs all 25 clay pigeons and he misses the last. In 1876, so she would have been 16 at this point, she marries Frank Butler and soon stars in his circus sharpshooting show. In 1880, she's hired by Sells Brothers Circus with Frank as her manager. In 1885, she successfully auditions for Buffalo Bill's Wild West, shooting glass balls in midair, times from Frank's hand, a cigarette from his lips. In one of her popular acts, shoots the ace of spades from a playing card by holding a pistol over her shoulder and focusing on the card's reflection in a shiny Bowie knife. The Sioux chief Sitting Bull, also in the show, calls her a little sure shot. In 1887, she tours Britain with the Cody entourage and captures of the fancy of Europe and its royalty. In 1901, she is severely injured when the Wild West train collides with another in North Carolina and ends 17 years with Cody's show. 1917 to 1918 gives marksmanship instructions at World War I Army camps and entertains the troops with her trick shooting. In 1922, an auto accident breaks a hip and leg from which she never fully recovers, and in 1926, Annie dies in her sleep, to be followed by Frank 3 weeks later. Both are buried in Darke County, Ohio. So here's her husband, Frank Butler, in 1883. And then there's another cabinet photo of Annie in dress and typical show costume in the 1880s. Here she is looking in a mirror to shoot the rifle over her shoulder. And here's in one of her fringed, embroidered outfits. And in the background here we can see her shooting an apple off the head of her dog, Dave. My God, what a well-trained dog. And here we have posters of her during the Wild West show. And here's a picture of her shooting from a bicycle. Then a couple of her guns, and then some pictures of the Native Americans that were in the Wild West show at the time. Chief Joseph, Hinma Tuya Lotket, thunder traveling to loftier heights. It's an amazing given name. Circa 1840 to 1904. Here's his stamp. Chief Joseph in his normal dress with the beads, his hair braided and wrapped, his earrings. It was the classic confrontation of white men in red. The national government ordered Native Americans to go onto the reservation, the Native Americans refusing to abandon ancestral lands, never surrendered by proper treaty. In 1877, the Native Americans were Oregon's Nez Perce, and one of their leaders was the able and eloquent chief, whose Christian name was Joseph. As usual, the government would win. The Indians submit, but for 15 incredible weeks, Joseph and fellow chiefs fought a brilliant running war against overwhelming numbers and won the admiration of the nation. The epic chase began in present-day Idaho when a U.S. cavalry patrol fired on a Nez Perce truce party. The Native Americans quickly dealt the troops a stinging defeat. Their group of 700 men, women, and children set forth on a 1,700-mile trek of fight and flee that repeatedly outmaneuvered their pursuers. The beleaguered Nez Perce were only 40 miles south of the Canadian border when cold hunger and futility compelled Joseph to surrender. Of his remaining 431 people, all but 79 were women and children. During the campaign, the press dubbed Joseph the Native American Napoleon. Though a warrior, he was not a war chief. He played a civil role as spokesman, guardian of the women and children, manager of the band's vast herd of horses, and at the end, the chief who at surrender uttered the most quoted words in Native American annals. "It is cold, and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." Isn't that heartbreaking? When the captives were taken through Bismarck and Dakota territory, the townspeople saluted their bravery, and a band played the Star-Spangled Banner. A promise that the Nez Perce could return to the Idaho Reservation was superseded by unhealthy captivity in Kansas and present Oklahoma, where scores of Nez Perce died. Twice Joseph visited Washington, D.C. to plead their case before Presidents McKinley and Theodore Roosevelt. Ultimately, part of his band returned, but Joseph never again saw the Oregon Valley of his birth. It's just heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. So here's a picture of him in 1901, looking very somber. Here's a portrait done in 1878. And here he is in a full feather headdress in 1900. And then again in 1903. I don't know, that looks like the face of sadness to me. So here we have some more pictures. His hatchet and peace pipe. Didn't work out very well, did it? Here's Joseph and General John Gibbon, who met 11 years after the retreat. It says he spent his last years at Nespelem on the Colville Reservation in Washington State. Here's another painting of him. This beaded front of his tunic, beads around his neck and the earrings, braided hair. Ermine tails used as fringe on a coat that's red and blue. I think many who are familiar with the Wild West know about Wyatt Earp, so let's read about him a little bit. Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp, 1848 to 1929. Here's his stamp. He's in a cloak with a neckerchief and his little lawman's star, cowboy hat, and his long mustache that he was so well known for. In a vacant lot behind Tombstone's OK Corral, 8 gunfighters slowly converged on a raw October day in 1881. On one side stood 4 cowboys, the Clanton and McLaury brothers. Approaching until only 6 feet away came Wyatt Earp and brothers Virgil and Morgan, and their close friend Doc Holliday. guns roared. In less than a minute, the two McLowrys and Bill Clanton lay dead or dying, and 4 others were wounded. Only Wyatt Earp walked away unscathed from the West's most famous shootout. Like many such showdowns, the mayhem behind the OK Corral was not a clear-cut triumph of lawmen over lawbreakers. While Virgil Earp wore the badge of city marshal and may have deputized Wyatt and Doc Holliday, the 3 bore a grudge against hell-raising cowboys, and particularly the Clantons and McLowrys. Several times in his 80 largely productive years, Wyatt Earp would stray briefly onto the wrong side of the law. He was born into a large Midwestern family, 4 brothers and a sister that remained close through life. He first saw the frontier at 16 when his father led an immigrant train of 40 covered wagons to Southern California. In time, Wyatt Earp drove stagecoaches, worked at railroad construction, hunted buffalo, prospected, kept saloons, and lived by gambling, at which he was an expert. Interspersed were stints as a lawman, at which he showed courage, constable in Lamar, Missouri, policeman in Wichita, Kansas, assistant city marshal in Dodge City, where he entered the dime novel pages of writer Ned Buntline, then deputy in Tombstone, where he fought in several gun battles. Between times he was arrested for horse stealing, but fled before trial, and was suspected of tracking down and killing several gunmen who assassinated brothers Morgan and Warren after the shootout at the OK Corral. Because of his reputation for courage and honesty, Earp was asked to referee the heavyweight boxing match between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey. His award of the decision to the underdog Sharkey provoked widespread wrath. That seems like something he'd do. Here is Wyatt Earp in his 20s from a tintype taken at Dodge City, Kansas. Oh no, Wyatt, where's that crazy mustache? Doesn't have it in that picture yet. And then here's the opposite end in 1925 when he's aged quite a lot. White hair, white mustache, relaxing in a chair with his legs crossed. And here's a portrait of him in 1926. I don't know if that's an actual photo or if it's a painting. I'm not sure. And then in 1870 with his trademark mustache. So here you have Virgil Earp, Doc Holliday, and Morgan Earp, who were in the OK Corral. Here's the Oriental bar in which Ike Clanton confronted the Earps the night before the gunfight. Wyatt was part owner, and Morgan and Doc Holliday occasionally worked there as faro dealers. And then here we have Wyatt Earp and Pat Masterson. And then we have Tom and Frank McClory and Bill Clanton. Wild Bill Hickok, James Butler Hickok, 1837 to 1876. Here's his stamp. Dark jacket, a bow tie around his neck, large mustache, long wavy hair. He's got his playing cards in his hand. The ruffians came rushing at both doors. How wild they looked with their red, drunken faces and inflamed eyes, shouting and cussing. but I never aimed more deliberately in my life. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 men fell dead. By the time this wildly exaggerated story had run its course in Harper's Magazine of 1867, James Butler Hickok had dispatched David McCannells and 9 other armed men, and his fame was assured. In reality, only 3 men fell, and perhaps none by his bullet. But Wild Bill stood ever after as a man to be reckoned with on the western frontier. 24 at the time of the showdown with McCannells in 1861, Hickok served with valor in the Civil War as a Union scout and spy. Soon he engaged in another famous shootout, killing gambler Davis Tutt in the Springfield, Missouri public square. When Hays City, Kansas, rowdy capital of the buffalo hide trade, needed a sheriff in 1869, the beleaguered citizens of Ellis County elected Hickok. Patrolling town in his Prince Albert coat, Wild Bill spoke softly, enforced the law, and pistol-whipped toughs and drunks. Twice he faced gunmen, and he killed both. In a murky dispute, he also killed a soldier and wounded another. He named Hays City, but Hickok sensed a growing danger. His fame made him a target for any punk who might look to kill him for reputation. Hell is now in session. Kansans said of Abilene when the Texas cattle drive swelled the railhead with thousands of hell-raising cowboys. Abilene hired Wild Bill, and he brought the revelers to heel. But here, in the heat of his gunfight, he killed an innocent man, and the mistake preyed on him. Prospectors struck gold in Dakota Territory, and Wild Bill staked claims and gambled in Deadwood saloons. Always he sat with his back to the wall to thwart trophy hunters. One night at the number 10 saloon, the wall chair already was filled, and reluctantly he took another seat. Half-drunk Jack McCall approached and at close range shot Hickok in the back of the head, a murder for which McCall was executed. Wild Bill's last cards, pairs of aces and eights, still are known as the dead man's hand. Well, there's a little gambling trivia for you. A pair of aces and eights. So here's an early photograph of Wild Bill. This is in 1858. Long, scraggly looking hair. A little bit of a goatee and a mustache. Hat, vest. Here he is in 1873 with longer hair and mustache. And again, a bow tie at his neck. Here he is in 1869 with a leather coat and fringes on the bottom, the belt, his knife tucked in. And here he is in 1863 holding a cigar for his photograph. He's got it's like an ascot around his neck, fur-lined collar, his coat, shorter hair, short mustache. Here's what his hand looked like. He had a jack and 2 eights and 2 aces. This is the Scouts of the Plains and Friends in New York, circa 1873, doing their posing. There's the Buffalo Bills theatrical troop flyer. And then here we have Wild Bill and Eugene Overton, photographed in New York in 1873. Here we have Jim Beckwourth, James Pearson Beckwourth, 1798 to 1866. So he was quite a bit earlier than the others. And here's his stamp. Leather coat with a fur-lined collar and a neckerchief. Hair and a mustache. Goes into a goatee. Born of black and white parentage in slaveholding Virginia, James P. Beckwourth was buried as a Crow Native American on a tree platform in the northern plains. In the 68 years separating these events, he tirelessly crisscrossed the West as trapper, army scout, and trader, showing a skill and courage that placed him in the front ranks of the remarkable breed known as mountain men. Beckwourth's family had moved to Missouri, where he was apprenticed to a blacksmith, when he joined a beaver trapping expedition into the Rocky Mountains led by explorer fur trader William H. Ashley. Quickly mastering wilderness skills, he accompanied Ashley on other ventures, trapped with the intrepid Jebediah Smith, explored the country around Yellowstone, and participated in the trappers' boisterous annual rendezvous. Beckwourth's fur forays into the northern plains led to skirmishes with the Blackfoot Native Americans and contact with their enemies, the Crow. With the Crow, he found a home. Joining the tribe in 1829, he took several Crow women as wives, represented his adopted people as a fur trader, and, according to his autobiography, rode in their war parties. Always restless, in 1836 Beckwourth served as a scout for Zachary Taylor in Florida's Seminole War, and scouted again when U.S. forces quelled insurrections in California and New Mexico. Between times, he joined 2 expeditions to obtain horses in California. In one epic drive, his party herded 2,500 animals across half a continent to forts on the plains. His memoirs, dictated to a one-time journalist, give a flavorful account of his adventurous life. Like many mountain men, Beckwourth boldly engraved his name on the map of the West. In 1850, he discovered a pass over the Sierra Nevada northwest of Reno, Nevada, that opened a route to the Sacramento Valley for westering pioneers and gold seekers. He himself led the first wagon train through Beckwourth Pass and passed the site of the California town that also bears his name. So here's a photo of him from the 1850s. Looks like a full-length coat on. He's got a knife tucked into his belt. Bow tie at his neck. Short cropped hair. And here's a drawing of him in 1856. And then another photo in 1860. This coat and vest and shirt. Mustache and goatee and short curly cropped hair. Here is a photo of Sue, one of Beckwourth's several Crow wives. His will leaves his property in Colorado Territory to my wife Elizabeth, so it must have been one of his other wives. And then here's a scene of the annual Rocky Mountain Rendezvous in 1837. Must have been a get-together. We have Beckwourth's trading post at the Ramelli Ranch. Here's a George Catlin illustration of 3 Crow chiefs. Here's a Plains Indian war bonnet made of a crow from the 19th century. Some trapping items. And then says a glamorized drawing of Beckwourth in boots made by a Victorian period artist for the 1856 edition of his biography. Alright, let's take a look at one more. else is Sacagawea. Sacagawea, or Bird Woman, 1787 to 1812. And here is her stamp. And she's shown carrying her child on her back. The Shoshone girl of the Northern Rockies was only 13 when a marauding tribe took her captive and made her a slave. In about 1803, Sacagawea was sold to French-Canadian fur trader Toussaint Charbonneau and became his wife. That same year, the fledgling United States bought Sacagawea's home as part of the Louisiana Purchase. To explore the new territory, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark pointed west toward the Pacific and their rendezvous with Sacagawea. Sacagawea met the explorers far up the Missouri River. They hired Charbonneau to serve as an interpreter and added the pregnant Sacagawea to the group because she spoke Shoshone, a skill they would need. That winter, Sacagawea bore a baby boy, whom she named Jean-Baptiste, and whom Clark began calling Pomp for Pompey. Sacagawea quickly proved her worth. She located native food plants when the party suffered hunger. When a riverboat capsized and her husband panicked, Sacagawea salvaged indispensable supplies. As they neared Shoshone country, she recognized landmarks and assured the explorers that they were on the right track. Lewis pressured her to make contact with her people. The Shoshones had horses, essential for crossing the mountains. They encountered a band of Native Americans, and fate took a strange turn. Sacagawea recognized her brother, by then a chief of the Shoshone. Now Lewis and Clark would have horses for crossing the Rockies. Sacagawea had more to give. As the party inched westward through potentially hostile tribes, Clark observed, "A woman with a party of men is a token of peace." She helped Clark determine the best route on the return from the Pacific. Meanwhile, Clark had developed a fondness for her and nicknamed her Janie. And at Christmas she gave him 24 white weasel tails as a token of her respect. Several years after the expedition, Sacagawea and Charbonneau accepted Clark's offer to educate Jean-Baptiste. Sacagawea is believed to have died in 1812 in present-day North Dakota. So a woman who made a big name for herself. This is an Edgar S. Paxson drawing of Sacagawea, standing proud in her fringed dress with a beaded belt and earrings and long hair, looking out over the plains. Here she is, a sculpture by Bruno Louis Sim for Louisiana Purchase Expo in 1905. And then an Alice Cooper statue in Portland circa 1904 with her baby on her back. Here we have a painting, a beautiful painting of Sacagawea with the baby on her back, looking over the mountains. And then a smaller painting with Lewis and Clark, and she's pointing the way. We have some map of 1814 showing the Rockies in all their splendor, and then Clark's elkskin-bound journal of 1805. Says traditional Shoshone beaded moccasins. And Sacagawea carried a son to the Pacific and back in a traditional Shoshone cradle board, which I think should be flipped. I believe this is the top. The baby slides inside there, and then they strap it to mom. We have a dress similar to what she might have worn. There's a decorative beaded top on this one, and fringe. Another one of Sacagawea section. Another little painting. Looks like she's in a teepee there, and Lewis and Clark are outside. And then in this painting, on the Columbia River with Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea is trying to communicate with the Native Americans in an amazing painted and decorated boat. Well, I think that's probably enough for today. We took a little bit of a look into the Wild West, and I do have a couple of other books that we can take a look at, so if you're interested, please leave me a comment to say so. Like and subscribe, that lets me know too. That's how I keep an eye on what books to revisit. If there's lots of people who like it, and maybe subscribed because of it. So if you do, that for me, it helps. As always, I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you're taking care of yourself.